The most respected leaders in the world are not trying to impress you. In fact, they have largely stopped caring whether you are impressed at all. This is not arrogance. This is not disconnection. This is the paradox that almost no ambitious person understands until it is too late. The moment you stop needing others to respect you is the exact moment they begin to respect you genuinely. We are taught the opposite from childhood. We learn that respect is earned through demonstration, through achievement, through showing people how capable we are. We build credentials. We seek visibility. We say yes to every invitation to speak, to present, to prove ourselves. We make sure people know what we have accomplished. And in doing all of this, we inadvertently send a signal that is precisely the opposite of what we intended. Consider a leader named Marcus. He is competent. He knows his industry well. But Marcus has made a subtle mistake that millions of ambitious professionals make every single day. He is always visible, always available, always eager to contribute in meetings. He shares his wins. He makes sure his boss knows when he has solved a problem. He volunteers for high-visibility projects. He wants people to think he is indispensable. The signal he is actually sending is this: I need you to know I am valuable. I require your acknowledgement. My sense of worth depends on your approval. The truly respected leaders in that same organization do something almost opposite. They speak less. They volunteer for fewer things. When they do contribute, it is weighted, intentional. It lands differently because it is not coming from someone desperate to be heard. It is coming from someone who is willing to be quiet, someone who clearly does not need your validation to feel complete. The paradox deepens here. The leaders who seem to care less about respect actually command more of it. The ones who are not always trying to impress you become the ones you want to impress. Why? Because respect is not actually generated by demonstration. It is generated by restraint. It is generated by the appearance of completeness. It is generated by someone who has other options, other concerns, other sources of meaning that have nothing to do with your opinion of them. But here is what almost nobody realizes about this. This shift is not about being aloof or cold. It is not about becoming unavailable or dismissive. It is about a fundamental internal realignment that changes how you show up in every interaction. When your need for approval dissolves, your presence transforms. You become someone different. Not better in the sense of more accomplished. Different in the sense of more whole, more settled. More dangerous in the way a calm person is dangerous in a room full of anxious people. The insight begins to make sense once you understand the psychology underneath it. Respect is not a transaction. It is an assessment. Other people are constantly reading whether you are secure or insecure, whether you believe in yourself or whether you are waiting for them to believe in you first. That reading happens in milliseconds. It happens below conscious awareness, but it shapes everything. A person who is constantly seeking approval sends this message: I am not sure about myself. I need external confirmation to feel solid. Therefore, I am not solid. A person who has moved beyond needing approval sends a different message entirely. I am not seeking anything from you. I am not here to convince you of my value. Whether you see it or not does not change whether it exists. Think about that for a moment. The very people who least need your respect are the ones who tend to receive it most freely, and the ones who are desperately trying to earn it are often the ones who lose it. This is not punishment. This is not judgment. This is simply how human perception works. We respect what we cannot control. We dismiss what is trying too hard to please us. What comes next changes how most people think about authority entirely. Because understanding this paradox is one thing, actually living from this place is something else completely. And it requires you to be willing to lose something most ambitious people are terrified to lose. There is a specific set of behavioral patterns that reveal whether someone is genuinely confident or whether they are performing confidence. These patterns are visible in almost every interaction. Most people miss them entirely, but once you see them, you cannot unsee them. And once you understand what they mean, you realize they are the exact behaviors that destroy the authority someone is trying so desperately to build. The first tell is over-explanation. A person seeking approval explains too much. They justify their decisions. They anticipate your doubts and address them before you even voice them. They worry that their position is not enough on its own, so they add layers of reasoning around it. They make the mistake of thinking that if they explain themselves thoroughly enough, they can convince you of their competence. What they are actually doing is signaling that they believe you need convincing, that you might doubt them, that their position is not self-evident. A truly confident person simply states their position, states it clearly, states it once, then stops. If you ask for more information, they provide it. But they do not volunteer it unprompted. They do not sense doubt in the room and respond with an avalanche of additional reasoning. This restraint is a form of authority. It says, "My position is solid. I do not need to defend it. You can question it if you wish, but my certainty is not dependent on your agreement." The second tell is approval-seeking language. Listen for it. You will hear it everywhere once you start paying attention. It sounds like this. Do you think that makes sense? Does that resonate with you? I am not sure if this is the right direction, but what do you think? Is this helpful? These are not genuine questions. They are hooks. They are someone casting their line into the water, hoping you will bite, hoping you will validate their thinking. A genuinely authoritative person does not fish for validation. They present ideas as ideas. They welcome feedback through legitimate dialogue, not through implicit requests for approval. The third tell is the need to fill silence. After making a point, an approval-seeking person gets uncomfortable in the quiet that follows. They interpret silence as disagreement, as skepticism. So they keep talking. They add another example. They restate the idea in a different way. They tell a story to support their position. They cannot tolerate the ambiguity of not knowing whether they have been understood or accepted. A person with real authority is comfortable in silence. They make their point. They wait. They allow others to process. They let the idea sit. Consider a woman named Sarah in a leadership meeting. She has prepared thoroughly for a proposal she is presenting. She has strong data. She has thought through counter-arguments. But the moment she sees the slightest frown on her director's face, something shifts in her. She begins to over-explain. She adds data that was not planned. She apologizes preemptively. She tells the director she understands if this is not the right timing. She is literally dismantling her own authority in real time. She is signaling that her proposal's validity depends on her director's immediate comfort with it. Meanwhile, across the room is a colleague named David. He has less data than Sarah. His proposal is actually less developed. But when he presents it, he does something different. He states it cleanly. He makes the case. He presents the reasoning. And then he says one thing that changes the entire dynamic. And that is what I recommend. We can discuss any part of it. But that is my position. He has just signaled something critical. He believes in what he is recommending, not desperately, not with hope that others will validate it, but with genuine conviction. He has moved beyond needing the room to agree before he can feel confident in his own judgment. The fourth tell is comparison and self-diminishment. An approval-seeking person constantly measures themselves against others, not in a way that motivates them to improve, but in a way that places them below. They say things like, "I am not nearly as talented as Marcus, but I thought I might try," or, "This is nowhere near what the senior team would produce, but here it is." They are giving you permission in advance to dismiss their work. They are doing your job for you. They are confirming your doubts before you even had them. This is the death of authority. A person who has moved beyond approval-seeking does not do this. They do not compare themselves to others, not because they are arrogant, but because comparison itself is a form of approval-seeking. You are either trying to prove you are better, or you are positioning yourself as lesser. Either way, you are giving external comparison power over how you view yourself. A person with real authority has become indifferent to the comparison game entirely. They know what they know. They know what they do not know. They are improving both, but they are not doing it to measure up to anyone else. Ask yourself honestly, how much of your day is spent in one of these patterns? How much energy goes into explaining your choices, into reading whether people approve, into filling silences because they make you uncomfortable, into diminishing your own work to give others permission to dismiss it? These are not small habits. They are the primary mechanisms through which you destroy your own authority, and they are almost entirely unconscious. What separates the truly respected from everyone else is not talent. It is not even achievement. It is a willingness to move through the world in a completely different way, to stop needing permission, to stop seeking validation, to become someone who knows their own value so completely that they are genuinely indifferent to whether others see it. When you stand near someone with real authority, you feel it, not because they are performing anything, not because they are demanding anything from you. You feel it because something is fundamentally different about their presence, the way they occupy space, the way they listen, the way they move through conversation, the way they seem to know something that most people are still searching for. Real authority has specific markers. It is not abstract. It is not something you have to imagine or infer. Once you know what to look for, you can see it in any room. And once you can see it, you can understand how to build it. The first marker is what might be called earned peace. This is different from happiness, different from contentment. It is a kind of inner settlement that comes from having made decisions you can stand behind, from having done the work you said you would do, from having built something, however small, that you believe in. A person with earned peace does not need to convince anyone of their worth because they have already convinced themselves through action. They have met their own standards, they have kept their own promises, they have become someone they respect, and that internal respect radiates outward. This peace manifests as a kind of relaxation, not laziness, not indifference, but a genuine ease in how they move through the world. They do not carry the tension of someone trying to hold up a false image. They are not managing other people's perceptions of them. They are simply being who they have actually become. This is extraordinarily powerful because it is extraordinarily rare. Most people are exhausted from the constant work of impression management. And that exhaustion shows. It makes them seem small. It makes them seem uncertain. A person with earned peace seems bigger somehow even if they are quiet. The second marker is what might be called selective presence. A truly authoritative person is not available to everyone equally. They choose where they direct their attention. They choose who receives their full focus. They choose what conversations are worth their time. This creates a genuine scarcity around their attention that makes receiving it valuable. When they listen to you, you know they are actually listening, not because they are performing attentiveness, but because they could be doing something else, and they have chosen not to. Most people are so desperate for connection that they are present with everyone equally. This devalues presence. A person who is selectively present is someone worth being present for. Consider a mentor named James. He works in a large organization. He is well respected. Junior staff members are constantly seeking his guidance. He receives dozens of emails a week asking for his time. But James has set a boundary that surprises people. He meets with exactly 4 people a month outside his direct team, no more. He is selective about who those 4 are, and when he meets with someone, he is completely present. No phone, no email, full attention for that period of time. The people who get that attention feel it profoundly. They feel valued. They feel worth something. And they tell others about it. So even though James is harder to access than someone who says yes to everyone, people want his time more than they want time with someone who is constantly available. The third marker is honest restraint. An authoritative person does not pretend to know things they do not know. They do not bluff. They do not fill gaps in their knowledge with confident-sounding nonsense. When they do not know something, they say so. Cleanly, without apology, without the need to then spend 10 minutes explaining why they do not know it or how they might find out. They simply acknowledge the limit of their knowledge and move on. This builds trust in a way that few other things do, because it signals that when they do claim to know something, they actually know it. Their words have weight because they are not diluted by false certainty. The fourth marker is what might be called the principle of removal. An authoritative person has systematically removed things from their life that would undermine their message. If they talk about discipline, they are disciplined. If they talk about integrity, their behavior can withstand scrutiny. If they talk about clarity, they are not muddled by contradictions between what they say and what they do. This consistency is invisible when it is perfect, but it is immediately visible when it is absent. You can sense when someone is performing a role they have not actually embodied. You can feel when their public message contradicts their private behavior. An authoritative person has eliminated this gap. They have worked to become, in private, what they claim to be in public. This alignment is extraordinarily difficult. It is also extraordinarily rare, and it is the foundation of everything. The fifth marker is what might be called the power of refusal. An authoritative person says no, frequently, decisively, without lengthy explanation or guilt. They are not trying to be liked by saying yes to everything. They are not afraid of disappointing people by declining requests. They understand that every yes to one thing is a no to something else. So they are careful about where they direct their energy. They refuse work that does not align with their priorities. They refuse conversations that drain without adding. They refuse to participate in dynamics that would diminish them. This refusal is not rude, it is clean, it is final, and it creates a powerful respect in those around them because it signals that this is someone who cannot be controlled or manipulated into behavior they do not choose. The final marker is what might be called the long view. An authoritative person is not optimizing for today. They are building for years ahead. They are willing to make decisions that look poor in the moment, but will look brilliant in 5 years. They are willing to sacrifice recognition now for capability later. They are willing to be unknown while they are becoming someone worth knowing. This creates a kind of patience that is almost invisible, but absolutely foundational. They move slower than the ambitious people around them, but they move with certainty. And slowly but certainly is how you build something that actually lasts. These are not personality traits. They are not things you are born with. They are behavioral choices. They are decisions you make repeatedly until they become automatic. They are the architecture of real authority, and they are available to anyone willing to build them, one choice at a time. But understanding what authority looks like is not the same as understanding how to build it. Because what comes next requires you to embrace something that most people find deeply uncomfortable. It requires you to become less visible, not more. To do less, not more. To participate in a pattern that feels entirely counterintuitive. There is a behavior that separates the most respected leaders from everyone else, and it is almost entirely invisible. It is not something they do. It is something they do not do. It is the power of strategic absence, and it is one of the most misunderstood sources of authority in the world. Most people believe that authority comes from presence, from being everywhere, from being involved in everything, from making sure people know you exist and that you are contributing, from saying yes, from volunteering, from being visible, from being heard, from being remembered. We are taught that visibility equals importance, that involvement equals value, that saying yes is always safer than saying no. So we say yes to everything, we volunteer for everything, we show up to everything, and in doing this we make ourselves common, we make ourselves expected, we make ourselves small. The most authoritative people are not visible everywhere. In fact, they are notably absent from most things. They do not attend every meeting. They do not respond to every email. They do not engage in every conversation. They do not weigh in on every decision. They do not volunteer for every project. They are selective, strategic, deliberately absent from most of what is happening around them, and this absence is precisely what creates their authority. Think about how this actually works in human perception. When someone is everywhere all the time, they become background noise. They become part of the furniture. You stop noticing them. But when someone is rarely present, when they do show up, it means something. It creates attention. It creates weight. Their presence becomes noteworthy precisely because it is not constant. A leader named Victoria understands this intuitively. She works in a competitive corporate environment. There are dozens of initiatives happening every quarter, hundreds of decisions being made, thousands of moments where someone could weigh in, contribute, be heard. Victoria does not participate in most of them. She does not attend most meetings. She does not give her opinion on most questions. She does not volunteer for most projects. She has become notable for her absence as much as for her presence. And here is what happens because of this. When Victoria does show up to a meeting, people pay attention. When she does offer an opinion, people listen carefully. When she does volunteer for something, people understand that it must matter. Her selectivity has made her presence valuable. This is counterintuitive only if you have not thought about it carefully. Consider a person who speaks in every meeting, who has an opinion on everything, who is always involved, who always contributes. What happens? Their opinions start to blend together. Their presence stops registering. They become someone you filter out. You have learned that they are always going to say something, so you stop really listening to what they are saying. They have become noise. Now consider someone who speaks rarely. When they do speak, you listen. Because it is rare. Because you have learned that when this person contributes, it is weighted, it is intentional, it is probably worth your attention. The difference between these two people is not intelligence, it is not competence, it is the deliberate choice of when to be present and when to be absent. But strategic absence goes deeper than just managing visibility. It also applies to emotional labor. Most people are available emotionally to everyone. They listen to everyone's problems. They invest in everyone's drama. They care about everyone's opinions of them. This is exhausting. And it diffuses their emotional energy across too many relationships, making none of them particularly strong or valuable. An authoritative person is emotionally selective. They do not care what everyone thinks. They care what a small number of people think. They do not have emotional energy for everyone's concerns. They direct that energy carefully toward a small circle. This creates depth. It creates real relationships. It creates the sense that being connected to this person means something. The same applies to time and attention. Most people say yes to every request for their time. They are available whenever someone wants to meet with them. They are responsive to every message. They are present whenever they are invited. This makes time with them cheap. Anyone can have it. An authoritative person is protective of their time. They do not say yes lightly. They do not respond immediately to every request. They are not available whenever someone wants them to be. This makes time with them valuable, scarce, worth protecting. When they do invest time in you, you feel the weight of that investment. Here is the key insight that most people miss. Strategic absence is not coldness. It is not rudeness. It is not rejection. It is discernment. It is the ability to look at a request and ask yourself, does this align with what I am actually trying to build? Does this deserve my attention right now? Is this the best use of my limited energy? And if the answer is no, having the confidence to decline without guilt or extensive explanation. Most people cannot do this because they have not built enough internal certainty. They are still hoping that by being available to everyone, someone will validate them. By participating in everything, someone will recognize their value. By saying yes constantly, someone will like them. An authoritative person has moved beyond this. They have already validated themselves. They have already recognized their own value. They do not need permission from the room. So they can afford to be absent. They can afford to decline. They can afford to be selective. What comes next compounds this. Because strategic absence is not just about what you remove, it is also about what you do with the space that creates. A person who says no to most things has created room in their life, room to do deeper work, room to think more clearly, room to build something meaningful, room to focus. While everyone else is spread thin across 100 small commitments, the authoritative person is consolidating their energy into a smaller number of things that actually matter to them. This focus is itself a form of power. It allows them to go deeper, to become better, to move faster in the areas they have chosen. And this concentrated excellence becomes visible. It becomes undeniable. It becomes the thing people respect. The person who is in every meeting is competent in nothing. The person who is in a few meetings and does exceptional work in those areas is building authority. The person who responds to every message is forgettable. The person who responds to selected messages thoughtfully is memorable. The person who tries to maintain emotional intimacy with everyone ends up feeling alone. The person who builds deep connection with a few ends up surrounded by genuine support. Strategic absence is about creating the conditions where your presence matters. It is about understanding that scarcity is what creates value. That focus is what creates excellence. That selectivity is what creates respect. Most people never learn this. They keep trying to be everywhere, to do everything, to be available to everyone. They keep trying to build authority through presence, and in doing so, they guarantee their own invisibility. Most people have made a critical mistake about who they are. They have constructed their identity around their status, around their title, around their position, around what they have achieved or what others think of them. This is not a small error. It is the foundation of fragility. And it is why so many talented people are so easily undone. Consider a man named Derek. Derek has worked for 15 years to become a senior manager. His title is important to him, not because the work is meaningful, but because the title tells him who he is. He is a senior manager. That is his identity. His sense of worth is built on this foundation. He has organized his entire life around maintaining this status. He dresses for it. He speaks about it. He reminds people of it. He protects it. His self-worth rises and falls based on whether people are treating him with the respect he believes this title deserves. One day, the company restructures. His position is eliminated. He is offered a different role at the same level, but with less prestige. Derek is devastated, not because the practical circumstances have changed dramatically, but because his identity has been threatened. He is no longer a senior manager in the way he was before, and if he is not that, then who is he? This is the danger of building identity around status. The person with real authority has done something different. They have separated their sense of self from their external circumstances. They have built an identity that is not dependent on their title, not dependent on their position, not dependent on what others think of them, not dependent on what they have achieved. Their identity is built on something much more fundamental. It is built on who they actually are, on how they actually behave when no one is watching, on the principles they are willing to stand by, on the person they have become through their own effort and choice. This distinction is subtle but catastrophic in its consequences. When your identity is tied to status, you are fragile. You are constantly worried about losing that status. You are hypervigilant about threats to your position. You are desperate to be recognized and respected because your sense of self depends on it. You cannot afford to make mistakes because mistakes threaten your status. You cannot afford to be vulnerable because vulnerability makes you seem less worthy of your position. You are trapped in a constant performance, and that performance is exhausting. That performance is also visible. People can sense when someone is defending a status rather than simply living from who they are. When your identity is separated from status, something shifts. You still care about doing good work. You still care about building things. You still care about growing and improving. But you do not care about these things because you need external validation. You care about them because they are aligned with who you have decided to be. You can make a mistake and recover from it without it being a catastrophe because the mistake does not define you. Your status could change tomorrow, and it would be a practical inconvenience, not an identity crisis. You can be vulnerable because vulnerability is no longer a threat to your sense of worth. You can be honest about what you do not know, because not knowing something does not diminish who you are, you. This psychological shift is invisible to most people, but it changes everything about how you show up in the world. A person whose identity is separate from status has nothing to defend. They have nowhere to protect. They have no image to maintain. They are simply present as they actually are. And this presence is what creates real authority, because it signals something fundamental. This is someone who knows who they are. This is someone whose sense of self is not dependent on your opinion. This is someone who cannot be shaken by criticism or rejection because their worth is not hanging on your assessment. Ask yourself where your identity actually lives right now. What would happen to your sense of who you are if you lost your current title tomorrow? If you were demoted? If your business failed? If you were publicly criticized? If you made a significant mistake that was visible to others? How threatened would you feel? How much of your sense of self would be destabilized? The answer to these questions reveals how much of your identity you have built on status. The process of separating identity from status is not quick. It requires examining where you actually believe your worth comes from. It requires challenging the stories you have been telling yourself about what makes you valuable. It requires building a new foundation for self-worth that is based on internal criteria rather than external recognition. It requires you to do things that feel counterintuitive. It requires you to be willing to look bad sometimes, to be wrong sometimes, to admit limitations sometimes, to prioritize integrity over image sometimes. All of these things feel threatening when your identity is tied to status. They feel liberating when it is not. One of the most powerful things that happens in this separation is that you suddenly become less concerned with what people think of you. Not in a way that is rude or dismissive, but in a way that is fundamentally honest. You stop filtering yourself through the question of how it will be perceived. You stop choosing your words based on what will make you seem smarter or more competent. You stop performing confidence when you actually feel uncertain. You become more real. And more real is more authoritative than any performance of confidence could ever be. There is a woman named Priya who works in the same industry as Derek. She had a similar trajectory. She became successful. She received a title and recognition. But Priya made a different choice about what that meant. She did not let her identity become attached to her status. She saw her position as something she held, not something she was. So when the restructure came, she was not devastated. She was practical about it. What changed in the company? What does my role look like now? How can I add value in this new configuration? She could ask these questions cleanly because her sense of self was not on the line. And in that stability, she became even more authoritative. People wanted to follow her not because of her title, but because of who she was. This is the shift that separates the genuinely authoritative from the merely positioned, the truly respected from the merely titled. It is the difference between someone who is defending something and someone who is simply being themselves. One is fragile, one is unshakable, one is constantly performing, one is always available to be fully present because they have nothing to protect. What comes next is where this internal shift starts to create visible external results. Because authority is not just internal, it is also behavioral. And there is a specific set of actions that emerge when you have separated your identity from your status. There is a dynamic in human psychology that almost nobody understands until they see it clearly. Once you see it, you realize it is operating in every relationship, every team, every organization. It is this. People want most intensely the things they cannot easily have, and approval is no exception. Most people are far too generous with their approval. They see someone do something good, and they immediately say so. They see someone accomplish something, and they quickly recognize it. They see someone make progress, and they eagerly celebrate it. This generosity feels kind. It feels supportive. It feels like leadership. But it has an unexpected consequence. It makes approval cheap. When a manager praises every contribution equally, praise becomes noise. It stops meaning anything. It loses the power to motivate or encourage because the listener knows it is freely given. It is given to everyone. It is essentially a reflex. It has no weight. Now consider a different kind of leader. This leader is economical with praise. They do not praise easily. They do not celebrate every accomplishment. They do not quickly recognize every effort. When they say something is good, you know they actually mean it, because they do not say it lightly, because they do not say it often. This leader's approval has become valuable precisely because it is scarce. When they acknowledge your work, it lands differently. It means something. You want more of it. And that wanting creates a powerful dynamic. You are now motivated not just by the work itself, but by the desire to earn their approval. This is not manipulation. This is not withholding approval to be cruel. This is a fundamental understanding of how value works. Value is created by scarcity. A diamond is valuable because it is rare, not because it is inherently more beautiful than glass. A piece of feedback is valuable because it is rare, not because it is inherently more true than constant feedback. An approval is valuable because it is rare, not because it is inherently more kind than constant approval. Consider a team in a technology company. The manager, Sarah, is well-intentioned. She tells her team members they are doing great work regularly. She celebrates their wins. She encourages them constantly. She wants them to feel valued. The problem is that her approval has become ambient. It is always there. So it does not register. Her team members do not actually feel more motivated by her constant praise because there is no scarcity to it. There is no achievement in earning her approval because her approval is given freely anyway. Across the organization is another manager, James. James is different. He does not offer constant praise. He is not cold. He is not withholding in a punitive way. But he is measured. When he recognizes someone's work, he does so specifically. He does not say everything is great. He says, this approach to solving that problem was elegant. The way you handled that client conversation was masterful. This proposal is genuinely strong work. Notice the specificity. Notice the restraint. He is not praising personality. He is not offering empty encouragement. He is offering real, specific recognition of actual excellence, and because this recognition is rare and genuine, it carries weight. His team members value his approval. They work to earn it. They feel genuinely seen when they receive it. The difference between these two managers is not effort. Sarah might actually be working harder to motivate her team through constant encouragement. The difference is strategy. James has understood that motivation does not come from being told you are doing well constantly. Motivation comes from the recognition that someone has seen something excellent in what you are doing, and that recognition only lands if it is rare enough to mean something. This principle extends beyond praise. It applies to attention. A person who is attentive to everyone equally is not actually attentive to anyone specifically. Their attention has become diluted. A person who is selective with their attention creates a powerful dynamic where receiving their attention feels significant. It feels valuable. It creates a sense of being seen that is profoundly motivating. Most managers try to give equal attention to everyone on their team. The truly respected managers give deeper attention to some people than to others. Not because they play favorites in a way that is unfair, but because they are honest about the fact that attention is a limited resource. They direct it strategically toward the relationships and people where it will be most meaningful. The same applies to recognition. Most people recognize everyone. They put everyone's name in the all-hands meeting. They celebrate every milestone equally. They make sure nobody feels left out. The consequence is that recognition becomes generic. It stops meaning anything. A truly authoritative person is more selective. They recognize specific people for specific things. This recognition is rare enough that it actually registers. It actually creates the sense that this person has noticed you doing something worthy of note, that you have earned something, that you have achieved something. The feeling is different. It is more powerful. But here is the key psychological insight that makes this work. This scarcity of approval, attention, and recognition must be real. It cannot be performed. People can sense when you are strategically withholding approval as a manipulation tactic. They can feel when you are being cold and calling it leadership. What works is genuine selectivity. You actually do have high standards. You actually do notice when work is excellent versus when it is merely acceptable. You actually do have limited attention, and you actually are directing it strategically. The scarcity is real, and because it is real, it creates genuine value. A person named Marcus understood this instinctively. He is a consultant who works with high-performing teams. When clients come to him, they often ask him to help them build a culture of celebration and recognition. They think the problem is that people do not feel appreciated enough. Marcus does something different. He helps them build a culture where achievement is genuinely recognized when it happens, and mediocrity is not dressed up as achievement. The shift is subtle but powerful. Team members stop expecting constant praise. They start aiming for the kind of work that is actually worth recognizing. They start caring less about whether they are being celebrated and more about whether they are doing excellent work. And the paradox is that in that shift, they become more engaged, more motivated, and more respected by their peers. Think about that for a moment. By reducing recognition, you can actually increase motivation. By being more selective with approval, you can make people want your approval more. By protecting your attention, you can make your attention more valuable. This seems backward only if you have not thought carefully about how human psychology actually works. What separates a leader people want to follow from a leader people tolerate is often not the leader's competence or vision. It is this subtle difference in how they distribute their approval. The authoritative leader has understood that approval is a currency. And like all currencies, it is only valuable if it is not infinite. Once you understand this, you cannot unsee it. And once you cannot unsee it, you will start to notice how differently you respond to someone who gives their approval freely versus someone who makes you earn it. But scarcity of approval is only part of what creates real authority. What comes next is the thing that actually makes a leader unshakable. It is the thing that protects their authority even when circumstances change. It is something almost nobody talks about explicitly, but everyone can sense when it is present. There is something that most people sense immediately, but almost never talk about explicitly. It is the gap between who someone is in public and who they are in private. This gap is invisible, but it is not undetectable. Other people can feel it. They can sense when someone is performing a version of themselves rather than simply being themselves. And this sensing happens below conscious awareness. It shapes their trust in that person. It shapes their respect. It shapes whether they want to follow them or whether they are simply complying because they have to. The most authoritative people in the world have done something unusual. They have systematically eliminated this gap. They have worked to become in private what they claim to be in public. This is extraordinarily difficult work. It is also extraordinarily rare. And it is the foundation of the kind of authority that cannot be shaken. Most people operate with at least some degree of inconsistency. There is the version of themselves they show at work, the version they show to their family, the version they show to their close friends, the version they show to strangers. These versions are different, sometimes dramatically different. A person might be humble in public but arrogant at home, generous with colleagues but selfish with friends, disciplined at work but chaotic in private life, honest in one relationship but deceptive in another. These gaps are considered normal. They are considered healthy. They are considered realistic. But there is a cost to these gaps. The cost is that other people can sense them. Not consciously always, but they can sense them. When you are interacting with someone, your brain is constantly running a pattern recognition algorithm. It is comparing what they are saying to how they are behaving. It is comparing what they claim to be to what you are actually observing. When these things align, you feel trust. When they do not align, you feel suspicion. You might not consciously know why you do not trust someone, but your body knows. Your intuition knows. There is an inconsistency somewhere, and you can sense it. Consider a leader named Richard. Richard is a motivational speaker. He gives talks about the power of discipline. He writes about the importance of showing up every day and doing the work even when you do not feel like it. He has built a following of people who admire his commitment to these principles. But privately, Richard is not disciplined at all. He skips workouts regularly. He procrastinates on important projects. He is late to meetings. He does not follow through on commitments he makes. The gap between his public message and his private behavior is enormous. And people sense it. Not everyone consciously, but people sense it. There is something off about him. There is something that does not quite land. His authority is built on sand. It only works as long as people do not see behind the curtain. The moment they do, it collapses entirely. Now consider a different kind of leader. Her name is Elena. Elena does not give motivational talks. She does not have a personal brand. She does not claim to be anything special. But in private, she is exactly who she is in public. She is honest about what she knows and does not know. She follows through on her commitments. She shows up when she says she will show up. She treats people with respect in private conversations the same way she does in public. She does not gossip about colleagues when they are not in the room. She does not manipulate situations to her advantage. She is fundamentally the same person whether anyone is watching or not. This consistency creates something powerful. It creates genuine trust. Not because Elena is perfect, but because what you see is what you get. There is no hidden version. There is no performance. There is just who she actually is. The difference in authority between these two people is not about charisma or talent. It is about integrity in the literal sense. Integrity means wholeness. It means being integrated. It means not being split into multiple versions. It means the inside matches the outside. And when this alignment exists, it creates a kind of authority that is almost impossible to undermine. Think about the people in your own life that you trust most. The people whose judgment you respect. The people whose leadership you would follow. I suspect they have something in common. They are consistent. What you see is what you get. You do not feel like you are being managed or manipulated. You do not sense a hidden agenda. You do not wonder who they really are, because who they really are is who they are showing you. This consistency is not something they have to work hard to maintain, because it is not a performance. It is simply who they are. Building this kind of integrity requires identifying where the gaps exist. Where are you different in different contexts? Where are you performing? Where are you not being honest? Where are you treating people differently when someone important is watching versus when they are not? These gaps do not mean you are a bad person. They mean you are human. But they also mean you are limiting your authority, because every gap is a crack in your credibility. Every inconsistency is something that can be sensed. Every performance is energy you are spending that could be spent on something else. The work of closing these gaps is quiet work. It does not happen in a dramatic moment. It happens through thousands of small decisions. A decision to be honest, even when it is uncomfortable. A decision to follow through, even when no one will know if you do not. A decision to treat someone with respect, even when they cannot do anything for you. A decision to admit a mistake, even when you could get away with hiding it. A decision to say what you actually think, even when it is easier to go along. These small decisions, repeated thousands of times, create a kind of integrity that becomes noticeable. A person named Thomas learned this through a difficult experience. He worked in sales, and he had been successful by being willing to bend the truth slightly to close deals. It was not dramatic deception, just strategic framing. Over time, this created a gap between his public persona as a trustworthy salesman and his private reality as someone who was willing to manipulate situations. He started to feel the weight of this gap. He started to notice that his relationships were shallow, even when they were with people who had worked with him for years. So he made a decision. He stopped bending the truth. He started being honest about limitations in his products. He started admitting when he did not have a good solution for a client's problem. His sales numbers actually went down initially. But something else happened. The relationships deepened. The clients he worked with trusted him more. They referred him more often. And when they did buy from him, they bought more confidently. His authority increased even though his close rate decreased. This is the paradox of integrity. When you close the gaps between your public and private behavior, you often lose some of the advantage you were getting from the inconsistency. You have to be honest about things you could have hidden. You have to admit limitations you could have concealed. You have to treat everyone decently even when you could get away with treating some people poorly. In the short term, this feels like a loss. In the long term, this is precisely what builds unshakable authority. Because you have become someone whose character can withstand scrutiny. You have become someone whose private behavior matches their public message. And that alignment is the foundation of real respect. The truly authoritative person is not concerned about maintaining an image because they have become the image. They do not have to work hard to seem trustworthy because they actually are trustworthy. They do not have to perform consistency because they are actually consistent. This allows them to relax in a way that the performing person never can. And that relaxation, that ease with who they are, is itself a form of power. What comes next is about the specific quality that this kind of integrity creates. It is something that can be felt immediately when you are near someone who has it. It is the reason that some people seem to command authority just by being present. There is a quality that shows up in certain people that is almost impossible to fake. It is not something they are saying. It is not something they are doing. It is something they are being. It is a kind of stillness, a kind of calm, a kind of presence that seems to take up space without needing to assert itself. And when you are near someone who has it, you feel it immediately. It changes how you behave. It changes how you think. It creates a subtle but undeniable sense that this is someone in control. This quality is what emerges when someone has mastered their own emotional landscape, when they have learned to observe their reactions without being controlled by them, when they can feel anger or fear or doubt internally without it spilling into their external presentation. This is not about suppressing emotion. This is about having such complete command of your emotional experience that your emotions inform your thinking without dictating your behavior. Most people are emotionally reactive. Something happens. They feel something, and they express that feeling immediately. Someone criticizes them, and they become defensive. Someone challenges them, and they become angry. Someone doubts them, and they become anxious. Their emotions are driving their behavior in real time. This reactivity is visible. It signals something fundamental. It signals that this person is not in control, that their internal state is determining their external presentation, that they can be triggered, that they can be manipulated, and once people sense that you can be triggered, they sense that you are not truly in command. Now consider someone different. Something happens. They feel something. But there is a space between the feeling and the response. They feel anger, but they do not express it through aggression or defensiveness. They feel fear, but they do not express it through hesitation or retreat. They feel doubt, but they do not express it through over-explanation or justification. There is a kind of mastery operating, a mastery of the space between stimulus and response, and this mastery is perceived as power. A woman named Catherine works in a high-pressure consulting environment. She is in a meeting with a senior client who is clearly frustrated. The client has just said something insulting about the quality of Catherine's team's work. The words land. Catherine feels them. She has an immediate emotional reaction. She feels angry. She feels defensive. She wants to explain why the criticism is unfair. She wants to point out what her team actually accomplished. She wants to be heard and validated. But there is something different about Catherine. She does not do any of these things. She pauses for a moment. She takes a breath. And then she says something like this: "I hear your frustration. What specifically in our approach is not working for you?" She has just done something extraordinarily powerful. She has taken an emotionally charged moment and transformed it into a problem-solving conversation. She has not suppressed her emotion. She has used her mastery of her emotion to choose a response that serves her actual goals rather than her immediate feelings. The client perceives something in that moment. They perceive that Catherine is not threatened. They perceive that she is not trying to defend herself. They perceive that she is genuinely trying to understand their concern. And the dynamic shifts. Catherine's calm has created space for a conversation that would have become a conflict if she had been emotionally reactive. This is how emotional regulation creates authority. Authority is not about being the loudest person in the room. It is not about being the most aggressive or the most dominant in a traditional sense. It is about being the person who is least disturbed, the person whose internal state is most stable, the person who can remain calm while everyone around them is becoming reactive. This creates a kind of dominance that is almost invisible but absolutely real. Think about physical dynamics for a moment. In a confrontation, the person who is most tense loses. The person who is most relaxed wins, because tension signals fear. Relaxation signals control. A martial artist who is calm and relaxed will beat a stronger opponent who is tense and panicked. The same principle applies in social dynamics. The person who is emotionally calm will dominate the person who is emotionally reactive. Not through aggression, but through the simple fact that their emotional state is stable and the other person's is not. But here is what almost nobody understands about this. Emotional regulation is not something you are born with. It is not a personality trait. It is a skill that you build through practice. It is a capacity that grows when you deliberately work with your emotional experience. And it starts with something simple. It starts with the ability to notice your emotions without being fused to them. Most people cannot do this. They feel something and they assume that the feeling is true. They feel angry and they assume the anger is justified. They feel afraid and they assume the fear is warranted. They feel inadequate and they assume the inadequacy is real. There is no separation between the feeling and the interpretation. They are the same thing. But that fusion is what creates reactivity. That fusion is what allows emotions to control behavior. A person who has developed emotional mastery has created a different kind of relationship with their emotions. They can feel anger without believing that anger is the truth about the situation. They can feel fear without believing that fear is an accurate assessment of the threat. They can feel inadequate without believing that inadequacy is real. There is space between the feeling and the interpretation. And in that space, choice becomes possible. Building this space requires practice. It requires sitting with emotions instead of immediately acting on them. It requires noticing what you feel without immediately expressing it. It requires observing your impulses without immediately following them. Over time, what happens is that you develop a kind of observer consciousness. You can feel something happening internally while simultaneously being aware that you are feeling it. And from that awareness, you can choose how to respond rather than simply reacting automatically. A man named David learned this through therapy after his business hit a rough patch. He had always been someone who felt things intensely and expressed them immediately. When things went wrong, he would panic. When someone questioned his decisions, he would become defensive. When challenges arose, he would become frustrated and irritable. This reactivity was exhausting for the people around him. It was also limiting for him because his emotional reactions were often causing the very problems he was reacting to. So he spent time learning to work with his emotions differently. He learned to notice when panic was arising and to pause before acting on it. He learned to notice defensiveness and to choose curiosity instead. He learned to notice frustration and to choose problem-solving instead. It was not natural. It required constant practice. But over time, something changed. He became calmer. Not because his challenges disappeared, but because he had developed a different relationship with his emotional experience. And as he became calmer, something else happened. People started to perceive him differently. He seemed more in control. He seemed more trustworthy. He seemed like someone worth following. This is the visible manifestation of emotional mastery. It shows up as calmness. It shows up as steadiness. It shows up as someone who can hold a difficult situation without becoming reactive. And this quality is extraordinarily rare, which means it is extraordinarily valuable. But emotional regulation alone is not enough to create lasting authority, because emotions are not the only thing that can pull you off center. What comes next explores the specific behaviors and daily practices that allow you to maintain this kind of inner control long-term, because mastery is not a destination, it is a practice that has to be maintained. Understanding authority intellectually is entirely different from embodying it behaviorally. You can know all the principles. You can understand emotional regulation. You can comprehend the power of absence and restraint. But none of that matters if you do not translate it into action. The question becomes this: what does an authoritative person actually do differently in their daily life? What are the specific behaviors that signal to others that this is someone worth respecting? How do you rewire your default patterns so that authority becomes your actual presence rather than something you aspire to? There is a man named Robert who decided to investigate this question. Robert worked in middle management. He was competent but not remarkable. He was well-liked, but not particularly influential. He had read extensively about leadership and authority. He understood the concepts intellectually. But he realized that his actual behavior did not reflect what he understood. So he committed to changing one behavior at a time. He started with something simple. He stopped responding to messages immediately. Previously, Robert had been someone who checked his email constantly and responded within minutes. He thought this demonstrated his availability and his commitment. What he actually discovered was that this behavior was communicating the opposite. It was signaling that he was not in control of his time, that he was reactive, that he was not doing anything important enough to justify not responding immediately to others. So Robert changed the behavior. He committed to checking email twice a day, in the morning and at the end of the day. When messages came in, he did not respond immediately. This created a small gap. It created the sense that Robert was focused on something else, that he was not at the constant disposal of others. The effect was subtle but noticeable. People started to think before sending Robert messages because they were not getting immediate responses. They started to be more thoughtful about what they asked him because his time seemed more valuable. And Robert himself changed. He felt less reactive. He felt more in control of his day. He was no longer serving the messages in his inbox. The messages were serving his actual priorities. This was just one behavior, but it was enough to create a shift in how others perceived him. And more importantly, it was enough to create a shift in how he perceived himself. He had become someone who was not constantly available. And in becoming less available, he had become more authoritative. Robert then looked at another behavior. He noticed that he often responded to ideas in meetings with immediate positive feedback. He thought this was supportive. He thought it encouraged people to contribute. But he realized it was actually diffusing the impact of genuine recognition. So he changed his response pattern. When someone contributed an idea in a meeting, Robert would pause. He would think about it genuinely, and then he would respond with either specific, thoughtful feedback or with silence, followed by a question that helped the person develop their thinking further. He stopped offering automatic positive responses. The effect was interesting. People started to pay more attention to what Robert thought. Because his response mattered. His opinion had weight because it was not freely given. Consider what happens when you start implementing these kinds of behavioral shifts. You are not performing anything. You are not being fake. You are simply aligning your behavior with the principles you understand. And as you do this repeatedly, something changes. Other people start to perceive you differently, not because you have changed fundamentally as a person, but because you have changed how you show up. And how you show up is what creates the perception of authority. Another critical behavior shift is how you spend your attention in conversation. Most people are poor listeners. They are thinking about what they want to say next. They are planning their response. They are waiting for their turn to talk. An authoritative person does something different. They actually listen, not to be nice, but because they are genuinely interested in understanding. This creates a feeling in the other person of being heard, of being seen, and that feeling creates respect. People respect others who actually pay attention to them. But here is what is interesting. Most people think they listen well. Most people think they are paying attention. Most people are convinced that they are genuinely interested in what others are saying. But if you actually examine your behavior, you will likely find that you are not listening at all. You are performing listening. You are waiting for the other person to finish so you can say what you want to say. An authoritative person has done the work to actually listen, to actually care about what the other person is thinking, to actually be curious about their perspective. This is not a small shift. It is a complete reorganization of how you show up in conversation. Another behavior that matters is how you handle mistakes. Most people, when they make a mistake, immediately try to mitigate the damage. They offer excuses. They explain the circumstances. They try to justify why the mistake was not really that bad. An authoritative person does something different. They acknowledge the mistake cleanly. They do not over-explain. They do not excuse. They do not defend. They simply say, "I made a mistake there. Here is what I am doing differently." The ability to do this signals something powerful. It signals that your sense of self is not threatened by a mistake, that you are not fragile enough to need to defend every error, that you have enough confidence to simply acknowledge reality and move forward. Ask yourself honestly how you respond when you make a mistake. Do you become defensive? Do you offer explanations? Do you try to minimize the impact? Or do you acknowledge it, take responsibility, and move forward? The answer reveals how much work you still need to do. These behavioral shifts might seem small individually, but they compound. Over weeks and months, they start to change how people perceive you. They start to change how you perceive yourself. You become someone who is less reactive, more intentional, more selective with your attention and approval. You become someone who listens genuinely. someone who acknowledges reality without defensiveness, someone who is not constantly seeking validation, someone who has standards and who is not afraid to maintain them. One more critical behavior deserves attention. It is how you handle other people's drama. Most people get drawn into it. Someone comes to them with a problem and they immediately want to help solve it. They want to offer advice. They want to be the person who has the answer. An authoritative person has learned to set boundaries around this. They are willing to listen. They are willing to offer perspective if asked, but they do not insert themselves into solving other people's problems. They do not become responsible for other people's emotional states. They recognize that taking responsibility for other people's drama is actually disempowering to those people. It signals that you do not believe they can handle their own challenges. By setting these boundaries, an authoritative person creates space for other people to actually grow. These are not dramatic changes. They are not performance changes. They are subtle shifts in behavior that compound over time. They are the daily practice of authority. They are how you transform understanding into presence. They are how you become the kind of person that others want to follow, not because they have to, but because they actually want to. But there is something important to understand about these behavioral shifts. They only work if they are sustainable. They only create lasting authority if they can be maintained long-term. And that requires understanding something that most people miss about authority entirely. What comes next is about building authority as something that actually lasts. Most people who understand the principles of real authority will try to implement them. They will stop seeking approval. They will become more selective. They will regulate their emotions. They will align their private behavior with their public message. They will do all of this with genuine commitment. And then, after a few weeks or a few months, something happens. The results are not coming fast enough. They are not being recognized. They are not getting promoted. They are not seeing the dramatic shift in how people respond to them that they expected. And so they abandon the work. They go back to being visible. They go back to seeking approval. They go back to performing. They convince themselves that the principles do not actually work. What they have not understood is that real authority is not built on the timeline they want. It is built on a much longer timeline. And most people do not have the patience to stay the course. Consider a woman named Jennifer. She was ambitious. She wanted to move up in her organization. She had read about authority and leadership. She understood that constant visibility was not the path to real influence. So she decided to change her approach. She stopped volunteering for every project. She stopped trying to be in every meeting. She stopped seeking constant recognition. She focused instead on doing excellent work in the areas she had committed to. She became more selective with her time. She became more intentional with her words. She listened more than she spoke. For the first 3 months, nothing visible changed. She was not getting promoted. She was not being recognized more. In fact, sometimes she was being recognized less because she was less visible. The doubt crept in. Maybe the principles were wrong. Maybe she needed to be more visible after all. Maybe she needed to keep pushing. She was tempted to go back to her old approach, but she did not. She stayed with it. She told herself that she was building something that would not be visible immediately, that she was playing a longer game. By month 6, something subtle started to shift. People in her organization started to seek her out. Not because they had to, but because they wanted her input on important decisions. Not because she was performing confidence, but because she seemed genuinely sure of herself. They started to value her opinion more because her opinion was rarer. They started to respect her more because she was not desperate for their respect. By month 12, the results were undeniable. She was promoted. Not because she had pushed for it, but because she had become indispensable. Not through visibility, but through genuine competence and presence. This is the timeline of real authority. It is much longer than most people expect, and most people do not wait long enough to see it compound. The problem is that the culture around us is optimized for speed. We are taught to expect rapid results, to measure success in quarterly terms, to expect promotions within a year or two, to see impact immediately. We are not taught patience. We are not taught that the most valuable things take time. We are not taught that the fastest way is often the slowest way. So when building real authority takes months and years instead of weeks, we assume we are doing something wrong. But here is what actually happens when you stay the course. When you commit to the principles and you maintain them consistently, something begins to build. It is like compound interest. Individually, each behavior shift is small. Each decision to remain calm instead of reactive is small. Each refusal to seek approval is small. Each moment of listening genuinely instead of planning your response is small. But over weeks and months and years, these small decisions compound. They begin to create a pattern. People begin to see you as someone who is fundamentally different from the people around you. Someone who is more grounded, someone who is more intentional, someone who seems to know something that most people do not know. This compounds in ways that are difficult to predict. You become the person that people seek out for counsel. You become the person that people trust with important information. You become the person that people want on their team. You become the person that people want to follow, not because you have pursued any of these things, but because the consistent practice of the principles has made you into someone worth seeking out. But there is a critical moment in this journey that most people hit. It is usually somewhere between month 4 and month 8. It is the moment where the pressure to revert is strongest. Something goes wrong. You miss a deadline, you make a mistake, you face criticism, and in that moment, the old patterns activate. The fear comes up, the need to prove yourself, the need to be visible, the need to explain yourself, the need to gain approval. And most people give in to these patterns. They tell themselves they can go back to the new approach later, after they have handled this crisis. But what they have actually done is broken the chain. They have interrupted the compounding. They have signaled to themselves that when things get hard, the old way is still the refuge. An authoritative person does something different. When difficulty arises, when pressure mounts, when the impulse to revert is strongest, they stay steady. They do not become more visible when they are anxious. They do not seek more approval when they are afraid. They do not abandon the principles when the principles are being tested. They stay the course. And it is that choice, made repeatedly in difficult moments, that is what actually builds unshakable authority. Think about this differently. Authority is not something you attain and then possess. It is not a destination you reach. It is a way of being that you have to maintain. It is a practice. It is something you do daily. It is the daily choice to not seek approval even when you are afraid. It is the daily choice to remain calm even when you are anxious. It is the daily choice to tell the truth even when a lie would be easier. It is the daily choice to maintain your standards even when maintaining them costs you something. These daily choices are what build authority, and they have to be maintained for authority to last. A person named Marcus learned this the hard way. He had built real authority over several years. He had become someone that people respected and followed. But then he faced a significant professional setback. A project failed. A decision he made did not work out. And in his fear and disappointment, he reverted to old patterns. He started trying to manage how people perceived the failure. He started seeking reassurance. He started being overly visible in an attempt to demonstrate competence in other areas, and in doing this, he began to undo the authority he had built. It took him 2 years to rebuild what he had damaged in a matter of weeks. This is the cost of breaking the chain. The insight is this: the fastest way to real authority is accepting the slowest timeline. There is no hack. There is no shortcut. There is no way to rush the process without undermining it. The only way forward is consistency. The only way to build something that actually lasts is to commit to the principles and to maintain that commitment through difficulty and doubt and setback. This is also the foundation of genuine resilience, because your authority is not dependent on circumstances. It is not dependent on whether people are currently recognizing you. It is not dependent on whether you are being promoted. It is not dependent on success or failure in any particular moment. It is dependent on who you have become, and who you have become is unshakable because it is based on your own alignment and integrity, not on external validation or circumstance. This is the real power of the invisible authority. It cannot be taken from you. It cannot be diminished by circumstances. It cannot be destroyed by setback or failure, because it exists inside you. It exists in your choices. It exists in your consistency. It exists in your willingness to maintain your standards regardless of what is happening around you. And once you have built that, once you have truly become someone of genuine authority, everything in your life changes. Not because you are trying to change it, but because you have changed, and everything responds to that change. You have spent the last hour exploring something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You have looked directly at the gap between who you think you should be and who you actually are. You have examined the ways you undermine your own authority through constant approval seeking. You have understood that the path to real respect is almost the opposite of what you have been taught. And you have glimpsed what becomes possible when you stop trying to impress and start becoming someone worth respecting. The journey ahead is not dramatic, it is quiet. It is the daily choice to maintain your standards when no one is watching. It is the decision to speak truth when silence would be easier. It is the practice of listening genuinely when planning your response would be more comfortable. It is the willingness to be unknown while you are becoming worthy of being known. It is the acceptance of a longer timeline than you want because you understand that the only timeline worth accepting is one that builds something that actually lasts. What you carry from this is not a technique. It is not a system to implement. It is a fundamental reorientation of how you understand authority itself. Authority is not something you perform. It is something you become. It is not built through visibility. It is built through consistency. It is not attained through achievement. It is attained through alignment. And it is available to anyone willing to do the internal work and then maintain that work with integrity and patience over years. The most respected leaders in the world are not the most talented. They are not the most accomplished. They are the ones who have become genuinely secure in who they are. They are the ones who have stopped needing your approval to feel complete. They are the ones who have built an internal foundation so solid that external circumstances cannot shake it. They are the ones who have made the choice to become someone worth following rather than someone trying to convince you to follow them. This choice is available to you right now, not someday. Not when you have more success or more credentials or more proof. Now. The moment you stop seeking the approval is the moment it begins to find you. The moment you commit to the long timeline is the moment real authority begins to build. You already have everything you need. You just needed to be reminded that authority was never about them. It was always about you.